Picture a bustling diner on a sultry summer evening in Columbus, Georgia, just a few miles from the gates of Fort Benning. The smell of fried catfish, buttered cornbread, and sweet tea fills the air, mingling with the chatter of families finishing their suppers. At first glance, there's nothing extraordinary about this scene, just regular folks wrapping up a day. But one table is about to ignite a storm. In a matter of minutes, a proud black veteran waitress with deep scars will face cruel insults, and an unlikely teenage hero will rise to defend her with 6 simple words. What happens next will test everyone's courage and humanity. Mama June's Southern Kitchen was a cozy place where regular customers found refuge at the end of a long day. Situated not too far from Fort Benning, it attracted both civilians and military families. There were pictures of smiling veterans on the walls, family photos of the owner's parents, and a large, meticulously polished plaque inscribed with the names of local heroes who had served in the armed forces. Every day around dinner, you could hear the clang of pots and pans from the kitchen, the sizzle of oil cooking battered chicken, and the vibrant voices floating through the cramped booths. It was early July. A humid, heavy heat settled over Georgia, making every breath outside feel like a workout. Inside Mama June's, though, the air conditioning hummed, gently lulling customers into a comfortable calm. Old friends caught up on gossip, truckers relaxed over a piece of homemade peach pie, and new patrons simply marveled at the down-home decor. But behind all the cheerful chaos was a sharp routine. Waitresses darted from table to table, balancing trays and calling orders. Cooks hustled by, stoves flipping catfish fillets and carefully checking that each meal was perfect. Among these hard workers was Sergeant Monique Mo Bennett, a proud Black Army veteran in her early 30s who had begun waitressing at Mama June's barely 6 months ago. Mo carried herself with a quiet grace, each step measured, each move careful but confident. Tall and fit, she moved like someone constantly aware of her surroundings. Customers often wondered if she had once been an athlete, or if she had grown up on a farm, used to early mornings and back-breaking labor. The truth was far more extraordinary. She had been a combat medic deployed twice, once in Afghanistan, once in Iraq. She had pulled men out of burning vehicles, bandaged bullet wounds under mortar fire, and saved more lives than she cared to recount. Yet behind that calm exterior, Mo also carried the weight of invisible burdens and visible scars. A deep, jagged scar ran from her right temple down to her jaw, and another smaller one cut across her left forearm. They were testaments to close calls that nearly ended her life. Yet she survived, and she wore those scars like badges of honor. Though many found inspiration in her story, not all the world was so kind. Tonight, that cruelty would show its face in the most vicious way, launching a chain of events none of the diner's patrons would forget. It was Friday evening, a time when Mama June's was jam-packed with families, soldiers on leave, and traveling salespeople. The local baseball team had just finished a game, and parents in matching jerseys crammed into booths, kids still buzzing about their performance on the field. At the far corner of the diner, 2 middle-aged men and a woman in her late 30s slid into a booth. From the moment they walked in, something about them felt off. While many customers were smiling or warmly greeting neighbors, these 3 wore pinched, suspicious expressions. Mo noticed their presence instantly, but she maintained her professional demeanor. She double-checked her hairnet, smoothed her apron, and approached their table with a friendly greeting. "Good evening, folks. My name's Mo. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The woman, her lipstick a garish shade of red, looked Mo up and down and sneered slightly at the scar on Mo's face. One of the men wearing a blue t-shirt 2 sizes too small cleared his throat aggressively. His name was Randy, as she would discover later. He stared at Mo's forearm, where that second scar was visible. For a moment the table was silent. Mo waited, pen in hand. She'd had her fair share of stares, so she calmly blinked, wondering what type of rude comment might come next. "Is that, some kinda gang thing?" Randy finally muttered, nodding to the scar on her arm. The woman next to him, Cheryl, let out a nasty little laugh. Mo's expression remained composed. She'd learned long ago that clapping back at customers in anger never went well. She took a steadying breath and explained, "No, sir. I served in the army. Got these overseas." Her words seemed to set Cheryl off. "So you're trying to get sympathy or something? Showing off your war wounds?" "So we'll tip better," she sneered. The third member of the group, a balding man named Martin, let out a low chuckle. He leaned in conspiratorially and added, "I've heard of your type. People who come back and can't do anything else but use their injuries as a meal ticket." For a moment, Mo felt heat flare in her face. The hostility in the air was sharp as broken glass. She'd dealt with microaggressions with ignorant folks, but this went beyond mere rudeness. This was venomous, hate-filled. Yet she'd learned self-control in the army. Her scars had taught her resilience. She forced a small smile and asked again, "What can I get you to drink?" Randy smirked, as if enjoying how their insults rattled her. "I'll take a Coke," he said. Then he added under his breath loud enough for Mo to hear, "and try not to bleed in it." Cheryl burst into open laughter. Martin joined, though he tried to stifle it behind his hand. A hot flush spread from Mo's neck to her cheeks. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, but she nodded. "Sure, sir. 1 Coke. And for you folks." A pause, a burst of laughter. The tension soared. Cheryl eventually shook her head. "Water. But in a clean glass," she said, dragging out each word with a sneer. Mo nodded once more. "Water in a clean glass." "And you, Sir?" Martin said. The same with a wave. But he and Randy exchanged glances. It was an unspoken statement that none of them trusted her. They believed she was something less than them. Mo turned and made her way to the kitchen, forcing her frustration inward. She handed the drink order to the station. As the ice clinked in the glasses, she tried to let the ambient hum of the diner calm her. She'd been in far worse situations, yet the emotional sting was undeniable. She was used to the stares, but outright mockery was a different beast. Still, she knew she had to keep her composure, partly because her job depended on it, partly because she had promised herself she would never let bullies shake her moral center. While the drinks were being prepared, Mo felt a sudden wave of memory wash over her. It wasn't always easy to keep the floodgates closed. Sometimes all it took was a snide comment or a hateful glance, and she was back in a war zone, dust swirling bullets, zipping overhead, the sharp metallic scent of blood. She remembered the night she'd earned her scar on the face. Patrol had been ordinary until it wasn't. An IED explosion tore through the darkness. Shrapnel bit into her temple, narrowly missing her eye. She pressed on, ignoring the searing pain. A fellow soldier was pinned under twisted metal, unconscious and bleeding profusely. She used every ounce of her training to save him. He survived, but the memory left its mark on her body and soul. When she returned stateside, she tried multiple jobs, but found it difficult to adjust to civilian life. The nightmares lingered, and many places wouldn't hire her once they saw the scar or heard about her PTSD. At Mama June's, she'd finally found a boss who valued her work ethic. The diner became a sanctuary where Mo could quietly rebuild her life. Even so, each day brought the risk of encountering ignorance or scorn. She accepted that risk to earn an honest living. Tonight, the cruelty hurled by Randy and his friends felt almost personal, like an attack on everything she'd sacrificed. And still she went about her responsibilities, determined not to stoop to their level. Mo delivered the drinks to the table. The trio continued their hushed conversations, throwing occasional glances her way. Taking their order was no easier. Cheryl insisted her fried chicken be extra crisp without your special sauce or whatever you're putting on it. Martin asked for the catfish plate, but in a tone that implied he didn't trust the cook. Randy demanded extra napkins because you might make a mess. Through it all, Mo jotted their orders, her voice calm. "Certainly, sir." "Absolutely, ma'am." In her mind, she recited a silent mantra. "They can't hurt me. They can't hurt me." She'd come too far to be broken by a few hateful words. When she turned to leave the table, she noticed a teenage boy at a booth not far away. He was probably around 15 or 16, sitting with his father, a man in a military uniform. The boy watched Mo with concern. Their eyes met for a second, and she gave him a polite nod. He looked away, cheeks slightly flushed. She couldn't help but feel a flicker of warmth. Teenagers around military bases often grew up with a strong sense of respect. Perhaps he recognized her as a fellow soldier, or maybe he just saw a woman who was being treated badly. Back in the kitchen, Mo alerted the cooks to the peculiar requests. She tried to carry on with her shift, serving other tables, with a smile, refilling coffee cups, delivering fresh plates of biscuits. But the tension from the that corner booth was like a stubborn storm cloud. Each time she walked by, she could sense their stares. She kept waiting for the next round of insults to drop like hailstones, and soon it did. It started with Randy complaining about a funny smell in the diner, loudly claiming it must be the odor of rotting flesh. Cheryl cackled. Mo heard the comment as she passed by, carrying a tray of mashed potatoes for another table. She couldn't be sure if it was about her, or if it was pure coincidence. But from the way Cheryl's eyes flickered to Mo's scars, she had a sinking feeling she knew exactly who they were talking about. When the trio's food arrived, delivered by Mo, with the same unwavering politeness, Randy deliberately took a bite of the fried chicken and spit it out on the floor. He dramatically wiped his mouth with a napkin, then flicked the napkin onto the table. "Disgusting," he exclaimed, voice booming. Heads turned. Conversations ceased. A hush fell over the diner. Cheryl shoved her plate away. "Yeah, now that you mention it, I can't stomach this either," she said. Martin joined the chorus, though it was clear from the untouched plate in front of him that he hadn't even tried his food. By now, every patron around them was craning their neck to see the spectacle. Mama June herself, real name June Davis. The diner's owner poked her head out from the kitchen window. Eyes narrowed. Mo had never had any complaints about her service or the quality of the diner's food. She swallowed, bracing herself to handle the situation. Calmly, she stepped toward them and asked, "I'm sorry you're unhappy. Would you like to order something else, or would you prefer I take these dishes back to the kitchen?" Randy's grin was vicious. "You can't do anything right, can you? That's your problem. You think just because you served in the army, you're some big hero. People like you want everyone to kiss your feet or something. Look at your face. That's what happens when you step out of line, I guess." A collective gasp spread through the diner. Mo's colleagues froze in shock. Mama June's eyes flashed with anger. Nobody dared move. For a heartbeat, Mo wondered if she should simply walk away. The insult struck home. She recalled the hours in the military hospital, the excruciating surgeries, the endless physical therapy. She'd stepped out of line. No, she'd run toward gunfire to save her fellow soldiers. Before she could think of a reply, Randy heaved an exaggerated sigh and said, "Why don't you be a good little soldier and get me a manager, or maybe just leave us alone for good?" Mo forced herself not to show the heartbreak in her eyes. "Of course," she managed to say, voice taut. "I'll let the owner know." As she turned, she felt tears threatening to break free. She had never felt so humiliated in her own place of work. She loved Mama June's because it felt like a family. But right now, these strangers had turned it into a war zone of words. She had to find a way to remain professional, to keep her dignity intact. Mo headed toward the small office in the back where Mama June was already waiting, having witnessed part of the spectacle. A stout woman in her late 50s with silver hair pinned into a neat bun. Mama June wasn't one to let bullies rule her establishment. "Mo, honey, you all right?" she asked, voice tight with concern. Mo swallowed hard. "I'm all right. They're asking to speak with a manager or the owner." Mama June put a comforting hand on Mo's shoulder. "I'll handle them. Don't you worry. Take a moment for yourself. Go wash your face, catch your breath." Mo nodded, thankful. She walked down the short hallway to the restroom, locking the door behind her. In the mirror, she stared at her reflection at the scar that had become the center of so many stares and judgments. Her hands shook. She took deep, slow breaths, reminded herself of her therapist's teachings, ground yourself in the present. She wasn't in a war zone anymore. She was safe. She was strong. She would not be broken by hateful words. Meanwhile, Mama June marched to the booth where the trio sat. She stood tall, crossing her arms. "I'm June Davis, the owner. I hear you have a problem with your food or with my waitress." Randy leaned back, looking entirely too pleased with himself. "Yeah, we got a big problem. Your so-called veteran server can't get anything right. Served us garbage. She's rude, incompetent, and we want our meals comped. We might just call the health department, too. Who knows what kind of diseases she's carrying around." Cheryl and Martin nodded vigorously, each with a glint in their eyes that said they wanted to push this as far as possible. Mama June's nostrils flared. She had dealt with picky customers before, but rarely had she seen such blatant disrespect. "I'll not charge you a cent, and I'll kindly ask you to leave," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the righteous anger behind it was unmistakable. "Now wait a minute, lady," Cheryl exclaimed, rising from her seat. "We came here to eat. We don't deserve to be treated like this." Mama June fixed her with a stare so firm it could bore holes in granite. "My waitress, Sergeant Bennett, served in the army. She has never given me or any other customer reason to complain. If you have an issue, you take it up with me, but you do not insult her service or her character. Now you can go." A tense hush fell over the diner. Randy slammed his fist on the table, causing dishes to clatter. He stood as well. "We're not done," he hissed, pointing a finger in Mama June's face. "We'll leave on our own damn terms." At this very moment, Mo emerged from the restroom, her eyes puffy but her composure regained. She saw the standoff, her heart pounding. She wanted to shield Mama June from harm. She didn't want her boss tangled in a confrontation caused by her presence. But Mama June was unflinching, unyielding, her mouth set in a line of steel. Just when it seemed the tension might boil over, a young voice cut through the silence. "That's enough." Everyone turned to look. It was the teenage boy from earlier, the one who had been watching everything unfold with growing outrage. His father, a uniformed soldier named Major Carter, stood behind him, looking unsure whether to restrain his son or let him speak. The boy, whose name was Jason Carter, looked no older than 15 or 16. He wore a T-shirt with the insignia of the Columbus High School Eagles. His face was flushed, his eyes bright with determination. Randy glowered at the boy. "Mind your own business, kid." But Jason refused to back down. He took a step forward, voice trembling slightly, but carrying enough volume for the entire diner to hear. "She risked everything for your freedom." Those 6 words hung in the air like the final note of a hymn in a hushed church. An electric current seemed to pass through everyone. Mo felt a jolt in her chest. She recognized those words as an echo of the gratitude many soldiers hear from patriotic families, but never had they meant so much. From the mouth of a kid standing up to bullies, they became a shield. They validated her service, her sacrifice, her identity. Randy, Cheryl, and Martin stared momentarily speechless. The rest of the diner watched riveted. Some nodded in agreement. A few even stood up the scraping of chairs loud in the stillness, as if to back up Jason's sentiment. Jason, emboldened by the tension, continued. "My dad served in Iraq too. He told me that men and women put their lives on the line. Black, white, everyone. They don't do it so you can come home and insult them. You want to insult a hero, then you're insulting all of them." Mama June put a protective hand on Jason's shoulder, guiding him slightly behind her. She gave him a proud, grateful look, then turned to the troublemakers. "Well said," she whispered before her voice rose again. "Now I've asked you to leave, and I suggest you do it before you make more of a fool of yourselves." The bullies looked around, realizing the entire diner was against them. Martin seemed to shrink under the glare of so many eyes. Cheryl's confidence deflated, and she grabbed her purse. Randy, still furious, tried one last time to hurl an insult at Mo. Just because she's a soldier doesn't mean she's any good as a waitress. But it came out weak, almost pitiful. Jason's father cleared his throat. "I think you should leave," he said in a measured tone, stepping forward. He was still in uniform. The bars on his shoulder told of years of rank. While he didn't threaten them, his presence was commanding. Randy swallowed, threw his napkin on the table, and with one last scowl at Mo, he stalked out. Cheryl and Martin followed, their cheeks burning with collective embarrassment. No one clapped, no one cheered. The 3 troublemakers simply slunk out like beaten dogs, cursing under their breath. But their departure brought a collective release. The tension shattered, replaced by relief. As soon as the front door shut behind the toxic trio, the diner burst into conversation. Some patrons turned to Mo, murmuring supportive words. Others thanked Jason. Mama June sighed heavily and rubbed her temples, shaking off the stress. Mo stood with her shoulders back, her eyes glistening not with tears of sadness, but with gratitude for Jason's courage. She approached the boy, whose father wore a proud smile. Mo stooped slightly, looking him in the eye. "Thank you," she said quietly. She wanted to say more, to acknowledge how special it was for him to stand up for her when no one else dared. But words were failing her. Jason shrugged, though his cheeks reddened at her attention. "I just hate bullies," he said, "especially when they pick on people who deserve respect." Mo nodded, touched beyond measure. She glanced at his father, who extended his hand. "Major Carter," he introduced himself. "I didn't get a chance to intervene before my boy here jumped in." You have my apologies for their behavior and my respect for your service. Mo shook his hand, her grip firm. No need to apologize for someone else's ignorance, sir. I'm just grateful your son was brave enough to call them out. Major Carter gave Jason's shoulder a squeeze, obviously proud. Mo noticed Jason's father glancing at her scars, but unlike the trio's gawking, there was compassion in his eyes, respect. Mama June joined them, clearing her throat. Well, I thank you too, she told Jason. That was mighty brave. Dinner's on the house for you and your father tonight, as my way of saying thanks. Jason opened his mouth to protest, but Mama June shot him a look that allowed no argument. Major Carter gave a small laugh. We appreciate it, Ma'am, but it really isn't necessary. Nonsense, Mama June replied. It's the least I can do for folks that stand up for what's right. Meanwhile, other customers cheered softly. Some resumed their meals, and the hum of the diner returned, though the energy felt lifted, as if an ugly shadow had been banished. Despite the supportive atmosphere, Mo found herself battling a storm of conflicting emotions. She was touched by Jason's intervention, yet shame still clung to her. Shame that she had to rely on a teenager to speak words that she felt she should have spoken for herself. She had faced gunfire and saved lives under the worst conditions imaginable. Why couldn't she stand up to a few cruel insults? But then she reminded herself that battles come in all forms. She had been battered by prejudice before. Sometimes it felt like a losing fight because you couldn't always change people's hearts. She took some solace in knowing that at least some people cared enough to defend her honor when hatred reared its ugly head. Behind the counter, Mo tried to focus on her work, but the adrenaline in her system made her hands shake. She set down the tray she was holding, took a few steadying breaths, and forced herself to check on other customers. To her relief, she was met with kind smiles and encouraging nods. One elderly woman patted her hand gently. "You're doing fine, sweetheart," she whispered. Those folks had no business talking to you like that. Another customer, a Vietnam veteran who often frequented the diner, gave Mo a respectful salute. She nodded in return. A tear nearly slipped from her eye at his silent acknowledgement of their shared brotherhood in arms. But as she returned to the kitchen, the memory of the war crept up again. The stench of burned metal, the screams of the wounded. She gripped the edge of the sink, trying to stay grounded. She thought of how close she had come to not making it home. She remembered the day she was pinned under a vehicle after a roadside bomb exploded, the agony of shrapnel slicing open her arm. And then she remembered the camaraderie of her platoon, how they risked their lives to pull her out. The scars were proof of that unbreakable bond. She'd never let a couple of malicious customers define her worth or tarnish her pride in her service. Life went on. The diner slowly resumed its normal rhythm. But what Mo and the others didn't know was that karma had already begun to spin its wheel for Randy, Cheryl, and Martin. Their hateful act would not go unnoticed. Outside, the three troublemakers had gotten into Randy's old beat-up truck. Fueled by anger, Randy stomped on the gas, peeling out of Mama June's gravel parking lot and onto the main road. Their departure was anything but graceful. Cheryl shouted that she was hungry, and that this night is ruined. Martin muttered that they should have at least gotten the free meal. Randy told them both to shut up. At a stoplight, Randy was so busy complaining that he didn't notice the red light switch to green. A car behind them honked. Randy stepped on the gas too hard. In his frustration, he took a turn too sharply, sideswiping a stop sign. The metal screeched against the truck's passenger door. Cheryl shrieked. Martin cursed, and Randy bashed the steering wheel in frustration. It wasn't a devastating crash, but enough to leave a long, ugly scrape across the truck's side and bust the rearview mirror. Breathing heavily, Randy pulled over to examine the damage. The side mirror dangled by a wire, and the paint was shredded. "What the hell?" he roared, kicking the tire as if that would fix anything. Cheryl rummaged through her purse for her phone to call insurance, then realized she wasn't even sure if Randy had current coverage. They began to argue, voices rising in the night air. Martin stood off to the side, silently cursing his luck for tagging along. All the while, Randy's anger grew. He had come to Mama June's feeling entitled, ready to mock and belittle. Now, in an ironic twist, his own carelessness and rage had cost him. After a few minutes of heated argument, the police rolled by, lights flashing. An officer stepped out to assess the situation. Randy tried to blame the sign's placement or some phantom driver who had forced him off the road. The officer gave him a skeptical look, took the statements, and eventually cited Randy for reckless driving. It wasn't a catastrophic punishment, but it was enough to put a dent in Randy's wallet and in his ego. Cheryl and Martin, fed up, demanded to be dropped off at a gas station where they could call a friend to pick them up. The night ended, with Randy alone, furious, dealing with both the damage to his truck and the ticket. It was a small taste of karma for his hateful behavior, and in a sense, it was poetic justice delivered swiftly. Back at Mama June's, word spread fast. Social media was buzzing with a few short videos customers had taken on their phones of the confrontation. Though it didn't go viral nationwide, it gained enough local traction that people in Columbus, Georgia started talking. Suddenly, folks who had never been to Mama June's were dropping by, hoping to show support or meet the courageous waitress who had faced down bigotry. Mo was initially overwhelmed by the attention. Strangers came to give her a hug or share their own stories of discrimination. Veterans wanted to shake her hand. More than once, she found herself stepping into the kitchen to quietly wipe away tears of gratitude. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her scars were not something to be ashamed of. They were an emblem of her survival, her resilience, and her service to a country she believed in. Jason and his father also became minor local celebrities. The local newspaper, the Columbus Ledger-Inquirer, reached out to interview them about what had happened at the diner. Jason, bashful in the spotlight, insisted he wasn't a hero, he had only done what was right. Major Carter, however, beamed with pride, crediting his son's sense of justice to the values he'd been raised with. Mama June took advantage of the positive buzz by announcing a Veterans Appreciation Day at the diner the following Saturday. Anyone who had served in the military, regardless of branch or era, would receive a free meal. It was her way of turning a negative encounter into a chance to honor the countless men and women who served. The event was a resounding success. The diner was packed from open to close, with veterans sharing war stories, laughing over old memories, and forging new friendships. Mo was especially busy that day, delivering coffees, refilling sweet teas, ensuring each plate of fried chicken or catfish was perfect. Every time a veteran extended a heartfelt thank you, she simply nodded her face, glowing with quiet joy. A week passed, and the fervor around the incident began to settle. But the echoes still lingered. Late one afternoon, just before the dinner rush, Mo was cleaning menus by the counter when the front door opened. Randy, Cheryl, and Martin stepped inside. Mo's heart jolted. Mama June, arranging pies behind the glass display, immediately tensed. A hush fell over the few customers seated at tables. The memory of their hateful scene was still fresh. Had they come to cause more trouble? Randy removed his baseball cap and held it awkwardly. Cheryl's arms were folded, though her defiant gaze was tempered by uncertainty. Martin hovered near the door. his posture stiff, hands shoved in his pockets. No one moved. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Randy cleared his throat. Can we talk to you, Mo?" he asked, his voice lacking its previous bravado. Mama June crossed her arms. "If you're here to start another scene..." Randy quickly shook his head. No, not at all. Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot last time." Cheryl gave him a pointed look as if she hated being part of this. Martin stared at the ground, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mo swallowed her chest tight. She glanced at Mama June, who nodded, indicating she would be near if things escalated. Slowly, Mo approached them. Her guard was up, but she forced herself to remain calm. "What can I do for you?" she asked, her tone polite but firm. Randy shifted his weight from foot to foot, then spoke in a halting, awkward manner. "I wanted to apologize," he said, finally, "about the things we said, how we acted." Cheryl and Martin said nothing, but they nodded. It was clear Randy had dragged them here. Maybe the public humiliation from last time, or the shame of going home to a damaged truck and a ticket had spurred him to do something he never thought he would try to make amends. Mo's eyes flicked between them, searching for sincerity. She had faced enemies on the battlefield, but seeing these people who had mocked her, who had assaulted her dignity in front of everyone, was a different kind of challenge. Did she believe their apology? Did she owe them forgiveness? Eventually, she found her voice. "I appreciate your words," she said guardedly. "But why now?" Randy sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I was raised in a small town with certain ideas. I guess I never questioned them much. When I saw your scars, I don't know. Maybe I felt threatened. Maybe I was just being a jerk. Probably both. But I realized after that night, especially after we crashed the truck and got that ticket, life's too short to carry around that kind of anger." He took a breath, glancing at Cheryl and Martin to see if they'd chime in, but they stayed silent. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You served our country and I disrespected that. It wasn't right." Martin shuffled his feet, finally mumbling sorry under his breath. Cheryl, still looking uncomfortable, shrugged. "Yeah, we shouldn't have gone off on you like that." Mo took a moment to absorb it. Inside, a swirl of emotions raged. Part of her wanted to unleash her hurt, to tell them off the way they had done to her. But another part recognized that anger could become a poison if left unresolved. She glanced at Mama June, who seemed ready to step in if necessary. After a tense moment, Mo said, "Thank you for saying that. I'm not going to pretend it didn't hurt what you said." But apology accepted. Randy exhaled relief, flooding his posture. Martin stared at the floor, seemingly grateful it was over. Cheryl's eyes flickered with something akin to genuine regret, though she didn't voice it in words. Mama June, though protective, eased her stance. She recognized that Mo had chosen to extend forgiveness. "All right, well," Mama June said, clearing her throat. "You folks need a table?" Randy shook his head. "No, ma'am. We just came to set things right." They left quietly, the glass door shutting behind them, without the hostility that had marked their last exit. Several customers watched, some seeming puzzled, others looking pleased at the turn of events. Mo felt a weight lift from her heart. She didn't know if their apology was entirely genuine or spurred by guilt, but at least a sliver of acknowledgement was better than nothing. The days that followed the confrontation brought a quiet kind of clarity to Mo. Something had shifted, not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. She wasn't just enduring anymore. She was building, healing, growing. And though the memory of that night still lingered like a scar on the air, it wasn't a weight, it was a turning point. At Mama June's, the rhythm returned to normal, but with a new undertone of unity. Customers continued to stop by, not just for the sweet tea or the fried catfish, but for a chance to meet the waitress with the soldier's heart. Mo didn't let it go to her head. Fame had never been her goal. But she did take heart in the respect, the genuine respect now offered by faces old and new. Word had spread through Fort Benning and the wider Columbus community. Her story had made it into the Columbus Ledger-Inquirer in a heartfelt column titled, "Scars of Service, Soul of Strength." The article captured the dignity Mo held, the courage she showed, and the boy Jason Carter, who had stood beside her when few dared. Mo clipped the article and pinned it to the staff bulletin board in the kitchen, right next to the photo of the diner's opening day. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that kindness was contagious, and courage could come from the unlikeliest of places. Meanwhile, her own life outside the diner quietly blossomed. She had enrolled in evening classes at Columbus Technical College, focusing on prerequisites for a physical therapy degree. After years of patching up broken bodies under mortar fire and explosions, she wanted to help fellow veterans mend on their journey home. Her classes weren't easy. Some days her mind wandered back to the battlefield during lectures on anatomy. Other times the bus ride to campus left her drained. But each time she considered quitting, she remembered the people who had believed in her. June, her fellow waitresses Jason and his father, and the dozens of quiet patrons who had smiled at her scars and seen past them. One Tuesday afternoon, Jason and Major Carter came back into the diner. Mo spotted them right away and grinned as she approached. "You two are becoming regulars," she teased, handing them menus. Jason looked sheepish but excited. I wanted to show you something." He pulled a composition notebook from his backpack, flipping to a page folded neatly in half. "We had this assignment for social studies. We were supposed to write about courage. I wrote about you." Mo's hand paused mid-motion. She sat beside their booth, gently taking the notebook. Across the top was the title, "She Stood Tall with Scars." Her eyes scanned the words, each sentence, both a tribute and a window, into how deeply the moment had touched him. He wrote of her patience, her pain, and the way she'd never raised her voice, even when she had every right to. He described the hate she endured not as the focus, but as the backdrop for something far more powerful, her grace. Mo's eyes welled up. "Jason, this is beautiful. I don't even know what to say." Major Carter gave his son a pat on the shoulder. "He got an A+, he said with a smile. "I'm not surprised," Mo said softly, handing the notebook back. "But the real A+ is for what you did that night. That took guts. You reminded people what decency looks like, even when it's uncomfortable." Jason looked down, shy again. I hate bullies. And that's what makes you strong," she replied. "Stronger than most adults, I know." Later that evening, as the crowd trickled out and the diner lights dimmed for closing, Mama June joined Mo at the counter. "You know," she said, sliding a cup of warm tea toward her, "you've got a presence now. People don't just come here for the food. They come because they feel seen, because you stood your ground." Mo sipped the tea, savoring its sweetness. "I didn't do it alone," she said. "It took a village and a teenager with more bravery than some generals I've met." June chuckled. "Still, you've got something special." Mo glanced toward the window where dusk had fallen across the parking lot, and fireflies flickered in the grass. I think I'm starting to believe that. And she was. The scars on her body remained. The ones on her soul might never fully fade. But they didn't define her anymore. Her story was no longer one of damage, but of rebuilding, of rising. And that, she realized, was the most powerful kind of victory there was. As weeks drifted into months, Mama June's southern kitchen evolved into more than just a Sioux local diner. It became a symbol of healing and unity. Nestled on the outskirts of Fort Benning, it drew an ever-growing crowd of soldiers, veterans, and families who'd heard whispers of what had happened there. A proud black veteran waitress who stood tall in the face of cruelty, and a teenager who reminded everyone of what honor truly meant. Mo's days were busier than ever. She split her time between early morning classes at the local community college and long shifts at the diner, where she moved gracefully from booth to booth, refilling sweet tea and delivering plates of golden catfish. Her dream of becoming a physical therapist for wounded veterans was now in motion, and she poured the same determination into her studies that she once gave to battlefield medicine. Though the trauma of war still lingered in her subconscious, the nightmares became less frequent. She found herself sleeping more soundly, breathing more freely. Some of that peace came from the love she received daily from regulars, those who greeted her with a nod of respect, a handshake, or even a quiet thank you for your service. Even the scars she once feared would always define her were now met with reverence instead of ridicule. She had transformed slowly but surely from a wounded veteran trying to stay afloat to a community pillar. People looked up to her, not because of the battles she had fought abroad, but for the strength she showed in everyday life. One golden afternoon, not long before the leaves began to turn, Mama June called Mo into the back office with a secretive grin. "Don't wear your usual uniform tomorrow," she said with a wink. "I've got something planned." Mo raised an eyebrow. "What kind of something you'll see?" June replied, tapping the side of her nose. "Just come ready for a surprise." The next evening, when Mo walked through the doors, expecting a typical shift, she was stopped in her tracks. The diner had been transformed. Flags lined the walls, candles flickered on every table, and the smell of fresh peach cobbler filled the air. Her old army buddies, some of whom she hadn't seen in years, rose from their seats one by one, clapping and cheering as she entered. It was a reunion she never knew she needed. Her comrades had driven in from different parts of the state, some even farther, answering Mama June's invitation to celebrate the woman who had once patched them up under fire and dragged them to safety without a second thought. There was laughter. There were stories, some exaggerated, some painfully real. And then there were the quiet moments, shared glances between veterans who didn't need words to say what they felt. The scars Mo bore were seen not as wounds, but as proof of the lives she'd saved and the courage she'd shown when it mattered most. Among the crowd were Jason and Major Carter. The bond between Mo and the boy who had stood up for her, with 6 unforgettable words, had only grown stronger. They exchanged a warm hug, as if they were old friends, bound by something deeper than time. As everyone tucked into their meals, Mama June clinked a spoon against a glass to gather the room's attention. Her voice, always warm, but now firm with emotion, carried across the diner. Tonight is about more than just honoring our veterans. It's about recognizing that courage doesn't end when the uniform comes off. Mo has shown us what resilience looks like, not just on the battlefield, but right here in our own community. She turned pain into purpose, insult into inspiration, and this diner into a place where healing happens every day. Applause erupted, echoing off the walls like a round of cheers in a stadium. Mo stood slowly, a heart full. She looked around at the faces her army family, her diner family, and the town that had learned to see her for who she truly was. "I didn't ask for any of this," she began, voice thick with emotion. "But I'm grateful. Grateful for every hand that reached out, every kind word, and especially for a kid who reminded a room full of people what respect really means." She turned to Jason, who ducked his head in shy acknowledgement. The room swelled with pride, and for the first time in a long while, Mo didn't feel like she had to be strong. She simply was. The celebration wasn't just about her. It was about all of them, those who served, those who supported, and those who chose kindness when hatred tried to steal the show. That night, beneath a dusky Georgia sky streaked in pink and gold, the lights of Mama June's glowed like a beacon, and inside, Mo finally felt whole. The bell above Mama June's door chimed softly, marking another end of another busy shift. Mo was wiping tables ready to close up, while the last few customers trickled out. She paused for a moment, glancing at the framed plaque honoring local heroes. Her own picture had been discreetly placed among them, a candid snapshot someone had taken of her at the Veterans Appreciation Day, wearing a slight smile, scars and all. "She risked everything for your freedom." Those 6 words would always echo in her mind, a reminder that sometimes the simplest expressions of truth carried the greatest weight. She thought of the insults that once tried to break her. She thought of how the community led by a brave teenager rallied around her. She thought of the small measure of karma that found its way back to those who had wronged her. And she realized that every sacrifice, every tear, every scar had been part of a journey that led her here to a place of healing and belonging. With a final sweep of the floor, Mo turned off the lights. The diner sank into peaceful darkness, the only illumination coming from a street lamp outside. She locked the door, stepping into the warm Georgia night. The sweet scent of magnolia blossoms lingered on the breeze. She looked up at the star-filled sky, offering a silent prayer of gratitude. Life wouldn't always be easy. There would be new challenges, new battles. But she had gained something precious: faith in the goodness of others, in the possibility of change, and in the resilience that each of us carries within. And that was more powerful than any insult, any scar, or any storm that might come her way. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of bravery, compassion, and redemption. If Sergeant Mo's courage and Jason's stand against hatred touched your heart, don't let their story end here. We all have a chance to be the voice of reason in a world that sometimes forgets compassion. It only takes a few words to make a difference. Words that heal rather than harm, uplift rather than tear down. By sharing this video, you help spread a powerful message about resilience in the face of prejudice and the enduring bond between those who've served and the communities they protect. So if you found hope, inspiration, or even a renewed sense of faith in humanity through this story, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Together we can continue shining light on the stories that remind us of our shared humanity.